Hey everyone, welcome back to the Patriot Party. Today we have a very important and timely conversation about bail reform, public safety, and policy. I'm joined by Ken W. Good, a veteran bail attorney, board member of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, and longtime expert in bail law and reform. Ken, thanks for being here. Absolutely. Ken, can you start by telling us a little bit about your background, how you got involved in this field, and why bail reform is such a critical issue to you?
Okay, so I think the most important thing to say about my background is I'm married, have two kids, I have two daughters. My wife is also an attorney, so that makes for interesting arguments. Seems like they're mostly legal, even when we're arguing emotionally. I think that's probably the most important thing to know about me. I've been an attorney for since 1989, which is too long, over 30 years, over probably 30 couple of years, over a couple of 30-something years more than that, probably more than I want to recognize or acknowledge. But I was always interested in legal arguments in law school. I was on some national teams. We had a Best Brief in the Nation award. I was on Law Review. When I got out of law school, I joined a big firm, and then I came to their Tyler office in Texas, and I started doing appellate work. And then I developed a practice representing clients on bail issues. I travel all over the state of Texas, and someone asked me to go to a hearing in Harris County on a federal case, and it was called O'Donnell versus Harris County, and it turned out to be a case that for a while was cited as the most important case across the country on bail. The problem is it kept getting reversed. The judge, who I thought was going in the wrong direction, and so I came out of that hearing saying we've got to become experts on these issues, because if we're not, nobody else is, and what they're saying about us or saying about the criminal justice system is wrong. And so I set about for us to become experts or very knowledgeable on these issues. And I think I've been proven correct, because this judge, who was cited across the country for a while, has been reversed 6, 7, 8, or 9 times on that case. In fact, the Fifth Circuit en banc ruled eventually that case should have never even been filed in federal court. And it was at one point cited across the country as the best example of bail reform in the country. And it's really the best example of going in the wrong direction.
Okay. Well, for listeners who may not be deeply familiar, how would you define cashless bail or no cash bail? What does it mean in practice?
Okay, so I would classify it as simple release. So you're releasing somebody on just their promise to appear. And the problem, and that's called different things in different parts of the country. So like in New York, it's called released on no bail. California would be called release on zero bail. In Texas, it'd be called release on a personal bond. And it can be very difficult to determine what's a simple release, because like in Texas, you can be released on $1,000 personal bond, and it makes it sound like you put up either $1,000 or a premium for $1,000, but you didn't. All you did was you agreed, you promised that you would pay the county $1,000, which you don't ever have. That's the reason why they're giving you a personal bond. So a simple release is you're being released on nothing more than your promise to appear. And that's the problem. Those types of releases have high failure to appear rates, and a criminal case cannot go forward if you're not there. So that causes backlogs. Backlogs put pressure on on courts to dismiss cases. And when cases are dismissed, criminals see that as a green light to commit more crime. And that's what's happening in our urban areas across the country.
Okay. So I know I come from a family of lawyers. All the guys except for me and my family were lawyers. I said I grew up with sharks, swimming with sharks.
Well, that's like me. Everybody in my family has a degree in math, but me, I don't do math, so I became a lawyer.
Yeah, all the women were teachers and all the men were lawyers or politicians. But so I'm going to ask you, I know growing up, I was always told a good lawyer can argue both sides. So I'm going to ask you a question that kind of goes to both sides. What are the main arguments in favor of a cashless bail? And conversely, what are your principal concerns?
Well, say that again. What are the principal arguments in favor of?
Yeah, what are the main arguments in favor of cashless bail? And then conversely, what are your principal concerns?
So what are the arguments in favor of cashless bail, simple release? I think the best argument in favor of cashless bail or simple release is that you need something in the system to protect the poor.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the problem is that's been used across the country, and it's been misused. And so, once you have a criminal history, you're no longer being held in jail because you're poor. You're being held in jail because you have a criminal history. There's a study that I've highlighted on our podcast that talks about what is the number one thing that impacts how long someone is in jail pretrial. And, our opponents, our friends on the other side, they would all say that it's poverty, ability to pay. But that's not what the study said. The study says that the number one factor for how long you're in jail pretrial is your criminal history.
Okay, before I go on to the next question, I want to get you to highlight something you just said. So you said there's something on your podcast. Can you tell our audience in over 140 countries what is your podcast so they can go check you out?
Well, sure. We have our own podcast. You can go to pbtx.com and find out more information about it. There's a link on the menu. But we also can just go directly to the podcast, thebailpost.com, thebail, post.com. All we talk about are criminal justice issues. We're ranked in the top 10 criminal justice podcasts, which I'm sure all of them have a very small audience. But, that's all we do. We talk criminal justice, what works, what doesn't work. And our goal is to build a library of episodes for lawmakers and the public so that you can educate yourself on what works. A great example is we have these people who argue all the time, we need to defund the police, defund the police, defund the police. We'll be safer when we defund the police. Well, there's studies on this from colleges, and all of the studies have come to the same conclusion. If you defund the police, crime goes up, it goes up dramatically, and especially the murder rates. And so, it's rhetoric versus science on that issue.
Well, and the Patriot Party's flagship legislation proposal that we have a conference tomorrow with Mike Johnson as chief of staff and the co-architect for our healthcare reform bill, where we started the initiative Fixing America and literally went from theoretically fixing problems to proposing legislation and creating legislation. But our flagship legislation, we like to say that ambiguous laws breed bureaucratic overreach and judicial activism. And we think that one of the big problems with the criminal justice system is we have these ambiguous laws that allow overzealous prosecutors to prosecute anybody for anything.
Well, the problem we've got right now is probably the opposite. We've got in our urban areas where it's become so political that we're decriminalizing or not prosecuting crime. And you've got Gascon, who just got defeated last November as the DA in California, in LA County. And he was arguing that, we just have a disagreement on who the real victim is, not the person who reported the crime, but the defendant that was arrested. And so he's determining who the victim is by the color of your skin, which I would say is racism.
Absolutely.
Pure and simple. And so, and then you've got, in our, on these soft on crime people, where they've been elected across the country, that's what they're doing. We're selecting crimes that they're no longer enforcing. And I think that's a bigger problem than, like the New York City prosecutor who decided to go after Trump after saying he wasn't going to go after Trump. And so, but I think the bigger issue and the bigger risk to criminal public safety is in our urban areas where we've got DAs that are just no longer prosecuting certain crimes on political grounds.
Yeah, and I'd like to clarify this for the listeners because we're kind of talking about apples and oranges. I'm talking about the federal system, and I believe you're talking about the state system.
That's probably true. But most of our criminal laws are enforced by the states. The amount of criminal law that the federal government enforces pales in number.
It's 1 in 10. 1 in 10, I believe.
But the problem is, we've got people who are advocating that we need to do the federal system on pretrial release. Well, the federal system holds approximately 75% of the people arrested. They're held pretrial. And the states, can you imagine what would happen if your home state decided we're going to follow the federal system and we're going to hold 75% of the people that are arrested? It would bankrupt the state. You can't do that. You got to find a happy medium.
Yeah, you do. So can you walk us through what Trump's recent executive order does, what the policy levers are, and what the administration is trying to accomplish?
Well, okay, I'm talking to the people who don't have Trump derangement syndrome, because the people who have a medical condition called TDS, they're not going to listen to anything I say, and they're not going to believe anything I say. But I believe that Trump has looked at the numbers, he's looked at the science, and so he's saying that the best thing for the criminal justice system is to not release people on simple release. And he has science to back it up. He is citing some studies from Yolo County where the district attorney there kept his data from during COVID, and he did a comparison of people released on simple release and someone released on a private surety bond. And he found that he compared the same people, nonviolent offenders, and the comparison was devastating, that the person released on simple release had a 200% greater chance of being arrested on a new violent offense in the next 18 months versus somebody who was released on a private surety bond. I mean, if you look at those numbers and you believe that they're correct, you would go, why on God's green earth are we ever using simple release? And I would argue that those numbers are correct. That's not coming from a Republican. That's coming from a California DA who just kept his numbers, his data during science. Now, what the rest of the Trump's executive order is doing, it's saying they're looking for ways to encourage states that have limited the use of surety bonds, and they're emphasizing the cashless bail. They're looking at ways to limit grants or limit funds to the state if they don't get rid of those, get rid of the cashless bail or limit it. And so that's really all what his executive order is doing.
Okay, so one of the clearest critiques is that cashless bail may allow dangerous individuals to go free, as we're talking about pretrial or reoffend. What does your experience say about that? I mean, I think it sounds like it says that you agree with that, correct?
Yes, but I would say, okay, so here's the example from New York. New York did, they enacted bail reform probably 5 years ago, and they've been rolling it back ever since. But 5 years ago, the initial reforms, they just made a list of crimes. And it said, if you're arrested for one of these crimes, then you have to be released on simple release. So in New York, it'd be released with no bail. The problem is, it's a cookie cutter system for release. Everybody has to be treated the same. So no matter if you're arrested once for this crime, you have to be released simple release. If I'm arrested 10 times for this crime, I have to be released the same way. And so the problem that I see with this simple release, and where you're tying the hands of judges, they have no discretion. And, you know, someone who's arrested 10 times versus somebody that's arrested one time should not be treated the same way. The history of our criminal justice system is we want to only exert that amount of pressure that will cause you to change and become productive. If we're now going to make it 10 times arrested for these crimes, you get treated the same time as a one time, well, we've seen what happens there. Organized crime gangs and career criminals find a way to start making millions and millions of dollars because a two-week stint in jail is just a cost of doing business in that situation, and that's the problem. And we've got to address that. And so New York has, by rolling back their reforms, and they've done that every year. Last time the governor Holcomb said she was not going to roll it back anymore, but now it's such a big issue again. Now she says she's open to rolling it back again.
Well, what do you say about the studies that have come out from Illinois and New York and other places showing no clear uptick in crime after bail reform? How do you reconcile those findings with public safety concerns?
I really want to use a very Texas phrase,
Okay.
just hokum. I mean, here's the real serious response. Most of those studies are pseudoscience, and when you look at this, you could do a whole episode on this, and I'm going to do an episode on this soon on our podcast. But here's the problem. Here's what they're saying on their little studies where they're cooking the books. They're saying, well, when you release more criminals with this simple release, on a percentage basis, it's not increasing crime. But when you look at their numbers and you go into the data, they're doing it on they're twisting the numbers to get to where they want. They will acknowledge that crime is increasing, but they're saying, well, on a percentage basis, because you've released more people. And there's one study that's come out and said, if you look at the numbers, in a certain way, it could be a 45% increase in crime. And they're still saying, well, on a percentage basis, it's not increasing crime. This is where we've been spending 2 years, where the public is saying, my eyes are telling me that crime is going up, and they've been saying, don't believe your lying eyes, believe us. And so that's where I go, hokum. That's that's probably the nicest thing I can say about it. I mean,
Well,
the rest is all colorful.
Oh, I mean, I understand that. And I'll tell you, I remember, I think it was last year when all these news reports came out, and I actually spoke to some law enforcement and reported on it. And they said they had actually changed the standard and the categories in which they report things, and it was manipulating the reports.
Well, there's a whole bunch of things like that. Harris County had a press conference saying crime was down, and then probably 6 months later, it was uncovered that they had administratively closed over 260 something thousand cases, and with the notation insufficient staff. And so what you're talking about is they change crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, and then all of a sudden crime is down. They did that in California when they did Proposition 47, and that's we've seen the effect of that there, because after they changed, that was the theft under $950, and then in our urban areas the DAs decided they weren't going to prosecute anymore. Shoplifting, it went through the roof, and now commercial property values are just going through the basement in value, and they're starting to foreclose on them. So these things have real consequences for your business, for your city and for your tax base. It's just a terrible situation, and what you're bringing up is the science that they study, or that here's another way to say it. Our activists have determined that if they come up with this pseudoscience and they flood Google, then that's what gets reported back to people, because Google is just a news aggregator. And that's really what AI is turning out to be. It's not really true artificial intelligence. It's an aggregator of what's on the internet. And since the proponents for change have learned how to flood Google with pseudoscience studies, that's what gets spit back at people.
Understood.
Here's the best example I have. So for the last 2 years, we've heard all this pseudoscience saying crime is not going up. Don't believe what you're seeing. And you don't have to believe us. You can look at the FBI statistics, because they show crime is going down. I've been saying for a long time the FBI was not correct, or their statistics were incorrect. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. It's not just me. There was a lot of social scientists saying that. So I wrote an article in October of last year saying, here's the reasons why you should not believe the FBI statistic. 10 days later, not because of me, just timing, the FBI statistics were suddenly updated, and they suddenly showed crime increasing. And that was a month before the national election, and that was when the Democrats suddenly shifted, and they no longer talked about crime. They just started yelling at the top of their lungs that Trump is a fascist, Trump is a tyrant, and it was because they could no longer talk about crime.
Yeah, I really believe, I've been doing a lot of reporting on California and New York, and there's actually a mass exodus, it seems, with the stock exchange coming to your state, Texas. A lot of businesses are leaving and going. I truly believe that the way they're handling, and they're going to try to do this 5% billionaire tax on their assets, I believe they're running out their tax income, and they're headed to be another Detroit.
Well, okay, so there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it's all really intertwined with the criminal justice issues, bail reform issues, and the immigration issues. Can you imagine what would happen if the politicians in Illinois, the politicians in New York, the politicians in California suddenly said, you know what, Trump is trying to decrease crime, and we have a crime problem. We don't. We have an Illinois governor saying we don't have a crime problem. And so I think it's all political. They can't admit that they've been doing the wrong thing. If they did, they would never win another election. So they're betting the farm on Trump is a liar. Trump is he's just going after Democrats. It's not, the crime isn't a real issue. The immigration isn't a real issue. And you think about it, they have no choice. They have to say that, because if they admit it, then they can't win another election, because they'll be punished by the electorate for a while. And so their house of cards is getting really stretched. And either they're going to, it's like a fight to the death in a wrestling match. So they're trying to topple Trump before their house of cards falls. I would say right now, with the infighting with the Democratic Party, their house of cards is so stretched that they may win the midterm elections, but it's going to be really close to see if the party doesn't collapse before then.
It's an interesting take. So as someone deeply involved in the bail industry, how do you see bail bondsmen's role? Is it a necessary part of the system or something in need of reform?
Well, we're always looking to see how we can do better, but I would say the private surety bail system is the best tool that the criminal justice system has for getting people to court. And I won't even, let me quote a judge who was a former judge who was a mayor. She was on a News Nation town hall, and she said, until you have an alternative to the private surety bail system that has the same low failure to appear rate and same high level of accountability, then you don't have an alternative. So I would say that everything that we've been trying for the last 5 or 6 years in some parts of our country, we're trying novel things that are not near as good and don't do the job and cause backlogs to grow. And backlogs growing, we've already said, causes pressure to dismiss cases to prevent the system from collapsing. Dismissing cases is seen as a green light to commit more crime. So I would say the private surety bail system is an integral part of the criminal justice system. And if you want people to go to court, you need to be using more of the private industry or the private surety bail system, because there is nothing that compares in getting people to go to court. If they say they have something that is comparable, they're lying.
Okay, so are there reforms within the bail system itself, for example, sliding scale bonds, no cash alternatives that can both protect public safety and address equity?
Well, those are not alternatives in Texas, so I don't have really any good experience with them. But I will say the sliding scale bonds, no, I don't think that those are good. And I'll give you an example, because Illinois got rid of the private surety probably 10 or 15 years ago, but they still kept what they were calling cash bail, but it was either the full amount of the bond or a percentage of the bond being paid to the courts. And so the courts were relying upon that money for operations. And so when Illinois recently had headlines saying we got rid of cash bail, they weren't getting rid of the private industry. They were getting rid of that, what was left that the courts were relying upon for operations. And so they've gotten rid of that. And I would describe that, the way they enacted that, they said that, well, we're going to get rid of the middleman. Well, the middleman was the one doing all the work. So if you're just paying the court to get release, you're not getting any checking in, you're not getting any assurance that they're going to show up. I mean, they have a lot higher failure to appear rate than the private industry. So you get none of the benefits, and you end up getting a lot of damage to the court, and they rely upon people's failures to appear to get operating money. That's counterintuitive.
So Trump's order is threatening to withhold federal funds from jurisdictions with cashless bail. Do you think this is a legitimate policy tool, in your opinion, or does it raise concerns of federal overreach?
Well, I do think that it is spot on. I think it's trying to do the right thing. I think it's pointing out the problems with using cashless bail. I think it's using a carrot and stick approach, which I think is the job of the federal government. I do worry. So what happens the next time we have a president in office who is being pushed by the other side? Are they just going to try to say, we're going to do the same thing? We're going to attack any state that uses surety bonds, and we're going to get rid of money to you unless you get rid of it. So I do have those concerns. But the problem is there's no alternative. So, unless you want to destroy the country, I think the chances of that are low. And I think Trump is trying to do the right thing. Now, I will say, those of you listening who have TDS, who do not think Trump is ever doing the right thing, seek counseling. Someone who, they tried to put him to jail in how many different ways before he ran for president a second time. No one in their right mind would do that unless they had good intentions. And people would not do that to you if they could win on the arguments, on the merits of the arguments. So they couldn't beat him on the arguments, so they went after him personally. And they didn't try to just, penalize him. They tried to put him in jail. And I don't know of any other person in the United States that could have withstood that. And I think he was doing it because he thinks that he is doing the right thing, and I happen to agree with him. So I would say, but here's my concern. If you hate Trump so much, then you're going to oppose this executive order, not because of the merits, but just because you hate Trump. And I think that's the whole problem that we have right now. I mean, if you can't say something nice about your opponent, then you're right in the middle of identity politics, and you're not going to change your mind. You need to get out of that. Your jurisdiction is taking advantage of you, especially on crime. They're favoring criminals over you, and you're going to have to vote for law and order, even if that requires you, God forbid, to vote for a Republican, until your party decides to go back to what they historically have been, and that's a law and order party.
Okay. We'll go off the cuff a little bit and push back just a little bit, because when I think about the question that I just presented, my main concern is the state is a sovereign, the federal government. It's the same concern about federalizing law enforcement in states that the governor doesn't want them. Yeah, it sounds good, it's feel good, but it goes against the founding principles of this country. It goes against the Constitution. It goes against things that were set in place, things that have been overlooked for years, where people say, well, the ends justify the means, and that's how we've gotten so far off track. So how do you deal with it not being a practical sense in it is telling another state, if you don't do what the federal government tells you to do, even though you're a sovereign, we're going to hit you with a stick. You can't tell me. We're both equal. We're sovereigns.
Well, wait a minute.
Well, I mean, you can't tell if there's certain instances. You're right. There's certain instances.
Well, wait. If I was concerned about the situation that you're talking about, hypothetically,
yes,
I mean the federal government would be coming to you and saying, you're going to do 1, 2, 3. You're going to elect. You're going to build these roads, and you're going to do it a certain way. We don't do it that. I mean, we don't do it that way. The way we do it here in the United States is we have the carrot and stick. If you want money from the United States government, this is what you're going to do. We've done that for just as long as what you've said we haven't. I mean, there are examples like look at the fight with Harvard. You know, they think they are entitled to all this money for federal research, and they talk about all the things they've done. There are colleges that have turned down federal money for 20 years because they did not want to be in this very situation. And so the problem is when you accept money from the federal government, then you accept the strings that they put on it. And so this is just another example of the strings. And I'm not saying whether I think it's right or wrong, but I'm saying this is not that out of the ordinary. It's just another example of strings being placed on federal money. Do I think we should have strings on federal money? Maybe not, but maybe we should have a lot less federal money. I mean, we don't have an unlimited supply of money, even though sometimes we think we do. I think that in our kids' generations, a lot of this spending is going to come home to roost. But right now, I would say, yeah, this is standard operating procedure. I mean, this has been the way. I mean, it goes all the way back to giving money for building federal roads. I mean, it's the states. The state highway system was built with federal money, and it came with strings.
So you don't think the Supreme Court will strike this down?
No, I don't, because I think that they've had opportunities to look at TROs that they've converted to preliminary injunctions, and then the courts have issued stays on those. One of the grounds that they're issuing a stay on is because of the likelihood of success was found incorrectly by the trial court. So I think, the federal government has a lot of ability to put strings on money they give you, and I don't. It's an example of Trump is doing something the government's long done. Maybe he's doing it in a new and a creative way, but it's an example that I would think he's probably on more firm ground than some of the other stuff he's doing.
Okay. So do you think this kind of pressure could force local jurisdictions to roll back reforms in ways that are unfair or harmful, especially to low-income communities?
Well, I don't. Okay, so first of all, I think our Constitution requires like a first-time offender, someone that doesn't have a criminal history, who says they're poor. I think that we have already protections in place for them. That's the reason why we originally had these simple release mechanisms enacted. The problem is reformers are pushing to expand them. So I think that we already have those in place, and I don't think that we need to expand the use of those. I think they need to be used limitedly because the failure to appear rate is so much different. And also, so, I'm going to say this, and this is going to be controversial to some people. But when you give somebody a simple release, knowing they have a much higher failure to appear rate, you're actually putting them statistically in a much worse place than if you'd given them a surety bond to begin with. Because let's see, they've got a 50% higher failure to appear rate. They fail to show up. What if the government then files charges on them for bail jumping? Well, now they're in a much worse place than they were to begin with.
So if you were advising lawmakers, what would you propose as a balanced reform path, one that addresses safety without sacrificing fairness?
I would say we need to be giving judges more discretion, not less. We do not need to be tying the hands of judges on trying to do a cookie cutter release. I think we should also put emphasis on criminal histories. Texas did reforms 4 years ago, and the number one thing they did that I thought was really good was they required judges to review criminal histories in setting bail. And because I think the number one indicator of what you're going to do in the future is what you've done in the past. I think our advocates for change don't like that because they don't want criminal histories to be taken into consideration. But I mean, that's the number one indicator. And I think overlaying on top of that, accountability. So like in Houston, Texas, when they give you a personal bond 17 times and you fail to show up 17 times, you shouldn't get a personal bond 17 times. You should get it twice. I mean, you may get one opportunity, but if it doesn't work, then it didn't work. Why would you give it to them 17 more times? And then we've got this philosophy in our system that you can't hold anybody accountable right now because we're going to favor criminals over victims, and we got to get rid of that. We know how to fight crime. It's just the activists are destroying that right now and tying the hands of people to do that. We're kind of working through that. One of the reasons why I'm very hopeful is what they're doing was not sustainable, and it's starting to unravel.
Well, you know what they say: if you do the same thing and expect a different result, I mean, what do they call that? Insanity.
Yeah. I would say rising crime now.
So how should the public think about bail reform? What narrative do you think is missing in most media coverage?
What I think is missing is this narrative we're not doing any analysis. Most of the bail reform that we're seeing across the country is bad bail reform. It's really, we're going to release more criminals, and that's going to cause more crime, and we're going to deny it. And so we're expecting you to believe us when we say it's not going to increase crime. What's going on in California is all tied to their prison system. They're not building additional prisons, and so they're capped at how many people they can put in their prisons. And so everything they're doing in California is just to release more people so they don't have to build more jails. And they're just lying to the public when they say, we're going to release more people, but it's going to make you safer. No, it's not. It's not. It never has.
Yeah, it's like saying, we're going to go up on taxes, but you're going to have more money.
Yeah.
You know?
That's exactly what they're doing.
So do you think political rhetoric simplifies the issue in unhelpful ways, either as soft on crime or unjust to the poor, rather than acknowledging the nuances?
Well, I think that the rhetoric is harmful. And the reason why it's harmful, because it's been around for a while, and I would say that the Democrats probably for 5 or 6 election cycles would wait till 6 months before the election, and then there would be something that would happen somewhere across the country, and then they would politicize it, make it huge, start protests, and they would tell their supporters, you need to get mad, you need to come out and vote, you need to come out and vote in larger numbers, and that's how they won elections for a couple cycles. The last election or two, they've not done that because it's starting to backfire on them. And, before they would use the rhetoric, but as soon as the election was over, they'd go back to what they're doing. Well, their supporters saw that. They've created, a gang. They've created, a group that have now started electing the true believers. And so they're losing control of the rhetoric. When you cause a group to get mad, you can't keep them under control. And so that's what's happened. And so you see now that they're turning on themselves. Now that you can see them electing socialists as the mayor of New York, socialists as the mayor of Seattle, and I would argue that the same groups that were supporting soft on crime DAs are now shifting their support, maybe, and they're supporting these soft on everything mayors, and so they think that that's their next point to create chaos or to whatever it is they want to do. And so I think that this rhetoric has caused a lot of damage because it's all emotional and it's mostly based on lies. When they say, you're being mistreated by the criminal justice system in our urban areas, when the prosecutor is the same minority as the victim, as the defendant, the judge is the same minority as the defendant, the bailiff, and yet they're still arguing you're being mistreated and there's a systemic racial problem, and I don't believe that. I think it's all political rhetoric.
It's all hot topics. It's all designed to get an emotional response. I deal with it all the time in social media echo chambers where everybody's just trying to get clicks and views, and everything's just so skewered. They leave out half the facts just to spin an agenda, and that's what we're trying to battle against with.
What I have found is when I'm doing a debate with somebody on the other side and they can't respond to me on the merits, I'm a racist, and suddenly jails are cages, and I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? So you can't respond to the merits of my argument, so now you're using toxic language to tell your supporters that you shouldn't even listen to anything Ken says because of his identity. So we're just resorting to identity politics because you can't respond on the merits.
Yeah, there's a big problem going on, big problem. And I think a lot of it starts in the education system. That's why we're pushing for some, we're working with the National Constitution Center to design a curriculum on American exceptionalism and constitutionality in a class where they go in, and in high school they would debate, respectfully debate and learn how to respectfully debate, like today's hot topics. In middle school they might do some historical stuff, but one would be given the liberal view of the Constitution and one would be given the conservative view, and that way they learn how to do public discourse. We lost that somewhere. Even our politicians have lost that.
Well, but the problem with that is one of our parties has decided that their way to try to stay in power is by teaching a specific curriculum, and so I promise you, there's some think tanks that have looked at this and decided Democrats are going to start losing unless you start doing these three things, and that's what they've done. And our education is one of them. I remember when my daughter was in high school and or college, and I was talking to one of her friends, and they were talking about climate change, and I was like, climate?
They don't have enough data points.
The sun is the number one impact on our climate, not men, and the cost of us being able to pay to do anything other than 0.001% is cost prohibitive. And they're like, and they looked at me like I was a complete idiot, and so I think that's just one example of that. But I think the immigration policy, I think it was solely related to keeping the Democrats in control, because now we know that the certain Democrat states were sacrificing their own citizens, the public safety, their tax base, just to bring in as many illegal aliens as they can, so that during the next census they would get more representatives for the House of Representatives, which is more power over the rest of the states. And so it's pretty jaded, but it looks like to me that that's what's going on, and it's going to continue until one party gets beat pretty good, and so we can either the Democrats are going to misrepresent and lie, or the Republicans, maybe they do the same thing. But on the law and order issue and on public safety and criminal justice reform, I look at, there's only one party who's actually looking at the merits of stuff, and the other party is just all political rhetoric, trying to make people angry to go vote for them.
And this movement itself is nonpartisan. I am a common sense conservative, but like I say all the time, I've talked to many people in Washington, and they say now a common sense conservative is like a 1980s Democrat.
Hey, that's a really good point, though. Historically, both of our parties have been law and order. The problem is one of the parties has outsourced its criminal justice and bail reform policy to activist groups. And I believe that because, if you're a politician and something doesn't work, then you come back and say, this doesn't work, let's try something else. But when you outsource it to activists, they'll never admit it didn't work. They just want more time. And so I see that. I mean, you can see that over and over with the soft on crime DAs.
Yeah.
They were given the same book of plays, and they were doing them across the country, even when they didn't work.
Well,
And you see that with the socialist mayors too.
wasn't Soros the one funding a lot of those DA elections? He was dropping $1 million in small towns, and I mean that's all it takes in a small town to get elected.
Yes, I think so, and I think it's the same group or coalition that's supporting the mayors in these inner city fights. And I think there was some reporting right before the election that Soros had thrown a bunch of money towards Mandani. So I think we're just seeing the playbook move from DAs to mayors, and the playbook with the DAs is those soft on crime DAs had 1 or 2 election cycle shelf life before they got the butts kicked out of them. The public just wouldn't put up with it. So I think the same thing's going to be true with the mayors.
Yeah, and I think a big reason, now you might want to push back on this, but I think another big issue is that both parties like to use the Constitution as a tool of convenience. If it's convenient, like right now, the Democrats, unconstitutional, unconstitutional, unconstitutional. Well, before Trump came into power, y'all were really unconstitutional. I mean, I lost a YouTube channel for censorship on stuff I cited the sources of.
No, I don't. I'm going to push back on that because
Okay.
we have never seen the judicial activism that we're currently seeing by the courts. Anything, I mean, I swear to you, if Trump was to say the sky is blue, some judge would declare that he is wrong and irrational and the sky is not blue. It's gray. And I think that is the level of judicial activism we're seeing is unprecedented because they're not planning to win. They're not ruling that he's wrong because they think they're going to win. They're just delaying because Trump has only got 4 years left. And, he's 10 months into his term now, 11 months in now. So he's only got 3 years and 1 month left. So they know they're going to lose the vast majority of these suits, but it's all about delay and get a quick headline that Trump was wrong, and then they get
But that speaks to our root where, we say, when we do reporting on every judge, which is, on judges, putting stays or holds or whatever they're putting on Trump, most of it is because, and we research what the bill says and everything, most of it's because of ambiguous bills. The Insurrection Act was written ambiguously, and therefore it's like the judicial system now is able to cross over into the lawmaking system.
Yeah, but that's what judges do. They interpret ambiguous bills. I mean, but the problem is, like I've said, we're in an unprecedented time, and it was even unprecedented during Biden's election because if you think back, Biden initially said, well, I can't issue an executive order on ABC because that would be unconstitutional. And then he couldn't get something through Congress. So he would then do an executive order, which is, that's, have we ever had a president say, I can't do that, it would be unconstitutional, and then a year later do that? And then the Republicans would sue and it would be declared unconstitutional. And, unlike today, most of those times, the courts would uphold what the judge said. What we're hearing now is the exact opposite. The judges are getting reversed left and right, and we're being told that the transigence is from the Supreme Court when it's the exact opposite. It's the lower courts that are trying to be, they're delaying what Trump is doing, and it's all political. It's all political.
But when a judge says, I think Congress meant, if you think as a federal judge, we sure as heck don't know as citizens, and void by vagueness kind of makes you think, well, if the law was intentionally written vague, then it was intentionally written unconstitutional because then the judicial system is not just interpreting, they are literally crossing in because there's so much interpretation to do.
Well, but I mean, it's hard to argue this in the abstract because, I mean, I would argue as an old appellate attorney, just old, listen, old attorney. That's one of the tenets of what the courts does. It interprets, statutes that may be ambiguous, or they interpret contracts that may be ambiguous. And there are a whole bunch of judicial authority on how you do that. How do you interpret a statute? Here's the principles that we are governed by. And, you've got this whole thing from the Republican side that would say we need to do a traditional interpretation based upon what the founders would have done. And then you've got the Democrats who have the living document interpretation, so we need to modernize it. And so, I mean, those are things that have all been very well litigated. We have a real strong opinion about what the Supreme Court of the United States right now would do. But I think, I mean, that's one of our, I mean, we've got a lot of judicial authority on that. So I don't know if I would agree with that to a certain extent. I do agree with what you're saying, that during this period of judicial activism, they're going to make decisions that are going to not be based in authority.
So the CQCB derives its authority from Congress, Article 1, Section 5, power to determine its own rules of proceedings by adopting internal procedural rules requiring CQCB review prior to final passage. Now, we couldn't dictate if it wouldn't be me, but
okay, so it's a legislative group.
Yeah, but it would be
Congress.
But it would be a nonpartisan and insulated from political influence by being funded through a dedicated congressional appropriation or protected trust. So it kind of operates outside, but it is within inside, unless it doesn't do the full job, and then we would try to seek a constitutional amendment where we kind of relook at checks and balances.
You're going to have to blend that with already the case law that already interprets or how.
No, we wouldn't be doing anything with the judicial. Now we could review.
I'm saying the judiciary would then look at that, but they already have all their cases that talk about how you determine judicial or legislative intent. So they would have to blend that with that case law. It would be strong legislative intent.
It's
workable.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we have a meeting tomorrow, a conference tomorrow with Johnson to see if he's going to push it through. So we'll have to see that and the healthcare bill. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this up. If you could give one key takeaway that you hope listeners would walk away with from this conversation, what would it be?
The one key takeaway that I would ask people to remember about our talk today, I think I would say, we're in an unprecedented time of being political. But historically, both the Democrats and the Republican have been law and order parties. Right now, we have one party that is not law and order and is overly political in that. And so I would ask people who listen to this, for one more election cycle, vote law and order. And if in doubt, if you're questioning whether your candidate is law and order, then he's not law and order. And vote for the one that I would say vote Republican, one more election cycle to get a law and order candidate. And then that will reset the other party to be what they've always been, law and order. We've had this happen in our history before where one party gets off kilter, and then when they get defeated, they recalibrate. That's what brought us Bill Clinton, a moderate. And so, we may be talking in 5 years about how the other party needs to moderate, and we need to vote against them on some issue. I don't think so, because I think the party right now is very business oriented, and so anything business oriented is good for the country, good for everyone. But I would say, what I would say is our criminal justice system is being overly politicized right now, and we've got a big problem in our inner cities. We can correct it. We know what to do. We know how to fight crime. We know how to decrease crime, and it's being prevented from being done by politics. And so with your help, you can help us correct that and go back to having public safety.
Again, thank you so much for joining us. Your insight is deeply valuable. Thank you so much for taking the time. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you found this conversation helpful, please share, rate, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe, stay thoughtful, and join our Saturday morning show at 10 a.m. where truth meets everything.